Okay, hola chicos, and welcome to year 8, new spring term, week 1 of spring term, and we're working at home at the moment, but hopefully be back in school soon. This is the first of your 3 lessons this week. The topic for this week is "Dónde fuiste?", which is all about using the preterite tense, the past tense, to talk about a holiday and where you went. So if you can start off this lesson, please, by writing down the title. We have "A dónde fuiste?". Remember the accent on the O in the question. There are question words in Spanish, remember? So "A dónde fuiste?", and then we'll move on to do more of the lesson. Now, just as we go through this, just as we're starting, you will need to have a red pen with you for the lesson today to correct work. And remember, you can pause the recording at any time while you get the tasks done, okay? And I will just remind you of that as we go through it. So here we go. "A dónde fuiste" is the title, and here is your so the date actually on here says Sábado 2 de enero, which is of course the day that I'm recording it on. You need to change that to Lunes 4 de enero if your first lesson is on a Monday, and you'll have to think about, depending on when your lesson is, what the date will be. Okay, so we're going to start off with a starter, which gets your brains in gear, hopefully. You have a map world with around 6, I think, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, I think it's about 6 countries marked on there. I want you, please, to have a look and see how many of those you can place on the map in the right place, hopefully. My geography isn't great, but hopefully yours is better. I don't have to do it, you do. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that. Pause the video while you have a look. You can use there's a useful atlas in the back of your planner if you're not sure about where things are. So pause the video while you have a think about where those countries would go on the map. You're going to write them all down in a moment. Just at the moment, you're just doing a brainstorm. How good is your geography? Okay, so hopefully you pause that and complete the task. What I want you to do now is to check your work, please. So here we've got the countries on the world map here, which are all, in most of those, a lot of them are cognates, so they look very similar and sound very similar to the English equivalents in Spanish. So Mexico, for example, Mexico on the left-hand side there as you look at the screen, is exactly the same apart from an accent E, but obviously the pronunciation is different. Up in the top right-hand corner there, you've got "A dónde fuiste?", which means where did you go? Fui a is I went to, and here are the locations. Okay, so moving on, I'd like you now, please, to write those down. You need to write this vocabulary down in English and in Spanish. So then pause the video while you do this. Remember, all your work needs to be done in your exercise book, and please make sure you underline headings and titles and dates. Here you've got to write those 16 words down in Spanish first of all, and then in English. You might notice here that you've got capital letters for the countries. You wouldn't have those for nationalities in Spanish. You do have them in the beginning of countries. Okay, so again, I'll pause, or you need to pause the video while you write that down. Okay, hopefully now you've got 2 lovely lists, English and Spanish, of countries. Moving on, here's the corrections, so you can check and correct your work in red pen, please, if you've got any of those wrong. Just watch out for the accents on number 2, number 9, and number 11. Okay, so once you've corrected that, again, if you need to pause, please do. Otherwise, we're moving on to the next task. Okay, so the next task is to look at the objectives. What we're doing this week is looking at vocab about holidays and the preterite of the verb ir. We're going to do a listening exercise today, and then later in the week you'll be setting targets on how to improve further. Okay, so first activity here is to look at the adjectives. You saw these, you have seen these before, but I'd like you please to write down the English and the Spanish equivalents of these adjectives. So they're mixed up on the right-hand side at the moment in red. Your task is to write them out in English and then write their Spanish equivalents next to them. So again, pause and then do that task, please. Okay, so moving on then to the correction here. We've got cool, great is guay. Es muy guay. Divertidísimo is really fun. Notice there you've got the adjective divertido. If you put the suffix, that is the thing that goes on the end of the word, on the end of the adjective, ísimo, it augments it, it makes it bigger. So any adjective you look at, aburrido, for example, meaning boring, if it were aburridísimo, then it means really boring. You've got un desastre, genial is great or brilliant, awful, horrible, interesante is interesting. So some cognates there that are going to help you out with this. So check and correct in red pen anything that you weren't sure about, but please look out for accents and spellings. Okay, moving on then, once you've corrected that. This is the lesson this week, and I'll read through this, but I want you to make sure you pause and look at this. You do need to understand it, and you do need to write this down as well. So I'm going to read through it, but you're then going to copy it into your book with neatly written at the top, the preterite tense underlined. So we use the preterite tense in Spanish to talk about the past. So it's also called the simple past tense or the preterite tense. For example, so yesterday I went to London. Last year we went to Spain. Last week my brother went to a concert. Now, from those examples, you can see we're only looking at one verb today in the preterite. That's the verb to go, ir. Obviously, the past to talk about all sorts of other things. So maybe you would have yesterday I went to London and I saw the Queen, or last year we went to Spain and I swam in the pool. Not looking at verbs like to see or to swim, we're just looking at ir. So this is one we're going to do listening next, where you're going to be listening out for where the speaker went, what it was like, and any extra details. So before we do that, please just write down the first the section of this slide. So the present tense is used to talk about the past, and then the examples, please. You don't need to write down the last bullet points on the slide. Okay, so if you've paused and you've written that down, now moving on. I am assuming that you're pausing this, you're doing the work really neatly. It's really important because we're missing a couple of weeks of face-to-face teaching here, and we want to make sure that you don't lose out at all. If you do as I'm asking you, then you'll be getting a really good introduction to the topic. Okay, so next slide is listening. Now you need to click on the sound file. Now I've attached in Google Classroom, and you need to listen to this. So you can do it at your own pace. You can listen to it several times if you like. You can pause it. You can go back and you can check that you've understood what you heard. You need to write down the table first of all. And there are 5 people. 5 personas van a hablar. 5 people are going to speak, and they're going to tell you el país, and that is the country where they went. Una opinión, so an opinion of their trip, and then any extra, so any extra details that you can hear. 5 of them to listen to. As I say, you have control over how many times you listen to the sound file. Click on it in Google Classroom to listen. And again, I'm going to stop for a second. You can pause the recording now and do the listening in your own time. Okay, so hopefully, so my cat came to join me, and I'm going to keep him out of the screen. I'm going to move on and do the correction here. So please make sure that you look exactly what you wrote down and check it and then correct in red pen if you need to. Okay, I'm just moving this away, sorry. All right, here we go. First one, Mexico. The person said, I went to Mexico. Fue genial. Great. Número dos, Argentina fue aburrido. Número tres, fui a Cuba. Guay. And the extra information there was, es un país muy bonito. It's a very beautiful country. Número cuatro, fue Gales. Fui a Gales. They went to Wales. Fue horrible. Qué frío. Hizo mucho frío. They said it was very cold. Qué frío. Número cinco, fue a Irlanda. Fue estupendo. I went to Ireland. It was amazing. And the extra information there was if anyone got it. Aprender inglés. Aprender is the infinitive to learn. So they went to Ireland from a Spanish-speaking country or wherever they came from to learn English. Okay, so again, check and correct your work in red pen, please, before we move on, before you move on. So pause, correct, and then move on. Okay, so you do need to have a look at this and copy down the information. This is again the grammar that we've been looking at today. So we've got some verbs are irregular. You know that that's the case because you have AR, ER, and IR verbs which follow the patterns, which is great. But there are some verbs which are irregular, and ir and ser are such verbs, are irregular verbs. And irregular verb, you just have to learn them by heart. You can't go around it. You can look them up all the time, but you do need to learn them so that you can recognize them when you come across them and use them. Ser and ir, you've got a bit of a go and go on because they have the same form in the past tense. Luckily, you can tell which one's being used in the context. So, for example, el fin de semana pasado fui al cine. Last weekend, I went to the cinema. Ayer fue interesante. Yesterday was interesting. So the first one is I went, that's in the verb ir, to go. It was interesting, is from the verb ser, to be. So this is what you need to make notes of this, please. So pause again if you need to before moving on. I'm going to move on now to show you the verb table, which you need to write down in full. So here we go. Common irregular preterite tense verbs. Ir, to go. Sorry, I've gone too far then. Ir, to go, and ser, to be. They are exactly the same in Spanish. So fui is I went, is also I was. Fuiste is you singular, went. You went to town, you went to Guildford. You were is also fuiste. Fue, he, she went or was. Fuimos, we went or were. Fuisteis, you plural, went or were. And fueron, they went or were. So you need to write this down now, please, exactly as it appears there, and make sure that you give it a heading which is clear, that you've underlined it, and you've checked that your verb endings are exactly as I've got them on the screen, please. Okay, so if you've now done that, going the wrong way in the PowerPoint, let's go back to where it should be. Just tracking tiny, where is it? There we go. So that's appearing again, you've already seen that. Okay, so now I have some sentences that I need you to write down, please. So this is a practice. So you'll notice here the things like beach, stadium, park, to go shopping, to go to a football match, to go to the sports centre, and so on. We did all of this last term. So in I think it was vamos a salir, we were going to go out. We looked at the future tense and places you were going to go to. Here you have got where you went. Now you need to do this. It's going to take you a few minutes, this. So I want you to pause the video, as you've been doing all the way through this, hopefully. And then write these down. Do them one at a time and use your verb table that you've just copied. Use the vocabulary from last term for things like beach, stadium, park, and so on. Those among you who are thinking carefully about the language, you'll see it's got things like to the beach, to the stadium, and that's going to remind you of when we looked at al and a la. So think back to when you did that. Fui a la playa is going to be the first one, for example. That's my cat. I can't keep him out of the way. He loves zooming. He thinks I'm talking to someone now, and he's trying to get involved. Okay, so I'm going to. You can pause the video now, please. Work on these. It's going to take you a few minutes. Please take your time and try to get this as accurate as possible. Thank you. Okay, so that's taken you some while, I imagine. You've had a few sentences there to do, and now I want you to check and correct them in red pen. So let's have a look. Here's the first one. I went to the beach. Then we had these ones here. So the first one I'd already said to you, actually, it was fui a la playa. So it's I went, which is fui. We've got a la playa. Playa, the beach is feminine, so it's la playa, so it's a la playa. Número dos, we went to the stadium. You should have fuimos al estadio. So just remember that you've got this al, there we go, which is a plus l, because l is masculine for el estadio. So a plus l makes al, fuimos al estadio. Número tres, they went to the park. So we've got they went, so we need the first person, also the plural version there of they. So they went to the park. Fueron al parque, and again al for al parque. My mum went shopping. Right now, shopping is ir de compras. So you need to have here the mi madre fue de compras. Número cinco, my brothers went to a football match. So my brothers would be replaced by they, which is the part of the verb we need here. So they went is fueron. Mis hermanos fueron a un partido de fútbol. Número seis, actually. Did you, singular, so talking to one person here, did you go to the sports centre? So well done to those of you who remember the sports centre. The question is going to be fuiste al polideportivo. And have a look at how much easier it is to do verbs in Spanish. In English, you have to say, did you go? The verb to do gets involved. I don't know why. In Spanish, it's much easier. To make the question, you take the statement. You went to the sports centre, would be fuiste al polideportivo. To make a question, you just take the statement, change your tone of voice, and put question marks around it, and it becomes fuiste al polideportivo. Finally, número siete, tenemos you, plural, so more than one person went to the bowling alley. So here's that part of the here, fuistes a la bolera. Okay, so you've got this screen here. You can pause it here as long as you like, and you can have a look at the verbs right. Did you get the positions right? Do that, or you know, the gender of the nouns right? For example, la playa, el estadio, el parque, and so on. Do you remember the vocabulary? Did that come back to you easily, or have you forgotten it all over Christmas after all the chocolate? Have a look at it and make sure it's corrected, and then we're going to move on. So I'll pause it for a second there. Okay, so hopefully you've now corrected everything. And what I want you to do now is to submit submit a picture rather of all your work on the assignment. Okay, so how did you do in the listening? How did you do in those translations? How have you written down the table really clearly? Will you be able to look back and use that for reference next lesson? Okay, and then tomorrow, let me just double check that I haven't forgotten anything here. Nope. So not necessarily tomorrow, but that your second lesson of the week will be appearing in the same format, and you need to make sure that you go to Google Classroom to get the work. Thank you very much indeed for all your work.